It's June 22nd, 1847, and another remarkable event is about to be uncovered by Arion, Rebecca, and Olly, the Retrospectors.
10 billion donuts are consumed every year in the United States alone. But before today in history in 1847, they didn't have a hole in the middle. And they weren't called donuts. They were known as oily cakes, or in one particular instance, which we'll come to, greasy sinkers. And I personally have enormous scepticism about the specific date here that we're discussing and some of the events contained within this episode. But the internet has coalesced upon them and some verifiable details. So let's try our best to do the history of holes in donuts in 10 minutes.
Yeah, I mean, the purported inventor of the hole in the donut is Hanson Gregory, who was a ship's captain in New England in the 1800s. And to be fair, while his gravestone identifies him as the inventor of the donut, the marker installed outside the house in which he was born in Camden, Maine in 1831 specifically identifies him as the inventor of the hole in the donut. And the reason that we have this story is that because in 1916, a Washington Post reporter appears to have just gone down to a sailor's retirement home in Quincy, Massachusetts, just to listen in on the residents' tales. And he happened to come across Captain Hanson Gregory, retired, at this point 85-year-old former sea dog.
Sounds like a reliable narrator. What are you suggesting?
Literally, you could just picture this reporter just sitting there with, with his pad and paper, with all these old sea dogs around him, with a pipe in their mouths, just writing down all of their yarns and being like, yeah, this is going to fill up a couple of pages.
And this is what was written down, and you have to forgive that this story sounds a lot like it was recounted by Grandpa Simpson. It goes like this. Now, in them days, we used to cut them into long strips, he's talking about donuts, bent in half and then twisted. I don't think we called them donuts then. They was called fried cakes or twisters. Well, sir, they used to fry all right around the edges, but when you had the edges done, the insides was all raw dough. And the twisters used to sop up all the grease just when they were bent, and they were tough on the digestion. And so, to solve this, Gregory had inspiration. He says, well, I says to myself, why wouldn't a space inside solve the difficulty? I thought at first I'd take one of the strips and roll it around. Then I got an inspiration, a great inspiration. I took the cover off the ship's tin pepper box and I cut into the middle of the donut the first hole ever seen by mortal eyes.
It's good. And actually, I think what I like best is the follow-up question the reporter asks, quote, were you pleased? Answer, was Columbus pleased? I mean, here's a man who really knows he's achieved something very important to the national character here, putting a hole in the donut. Well, sir, them donuts was the finest I ever tasted. No more indigestion, no more greasy sinkers. There it is. But just well done, fried through donuts. However, once you type into the internet now, who invented the donut, there are so many alternative stories that come about, none of which appear to be evidenced by this interview which he gave. But people will say, so let's repeat it because it's fun, that maybe the hole in the donut came about because he was trying to keep both hands on the wheel of the ship in a storm, so he skewered one of the donuts on the ship's wheel. Some people say that he cut the hole with a fork, so like round the family table. There's an anecdote about how when he was a kid, he was like, Ma, these greasy sinkers need a hole, and took a fork and just did it himself. Some people say he was trying to imitate the life preservers on board, so inspired was he by the decoration of a ship.
Nice.
And yet, none of this really can be backed up with anything apart from like fanciful art that's come about since, depicting this man. And I think this touches on what you were alluding to, Rebecca, when you said that he appears to have invented the hole in the donut. No one's really disagreeing with that. And yet that's become he invented the donut. And I think the reason for that is he happened to die in Quincy, Massachusetts, which is the same town where Dunkin Donuts began in 1950. And Dunkin paid for his headstone in 1982. So I do think it's to their corporate interest to say that he invented the donut because the Dunkin donut has a hole in the middle. Now, of course, if you're listening internationally, particularly in Britain, you'll know a donut doesn't need a hole in the middle. I mean, that is American-centric nonsense. A donut should have jam or custard in the middle and be bought from Tesco.
Yeah, I mean, fried sweet yeasted dough as a treat has existed since at least medieval times. Across Europe, they had an association with carnival season, people using up all of their rich, indulgent ingredients before the start of Lent. You know, it's a philosophical question. This might sound like a nonsense episode. Are churros a donut?
Yes.
You know?
Ooh.
Yes, they are. They are a type of donut. Yes.
No, they're not, Ollie. That's just stupid. It was a rhetorical question.
It's philosophical.
No. Are beignets a donut? Well, yes, they are, because that's what the French call donuts. A zeppelin a donut? Maybe. I mean, you can go back even further. There is a recipe for a simple flour and water fritter in De Re Culinaria, a Roman cookbook that probably was compiled in the 400s. The word donut first appears in an 1803 cookbook called The Frugal Housewife by Susanna Carpenter that was published in London. Like most cookbooks of that era, the instructions are aimed at people who are very experienced home cooks, and so they are sparse. She writes, to 1 pound of flour, put 1/4 of a pound of butter, 1/4 of a pound of sugar, 2 spoonfuls of yeast, mix them all together in warm milk or water of the thickness of bread, let it rise, make them in what form you pleased, boil your fat consisting of hog's lard and put them in.
Hog's lard.
Yum, yum.
Yeah, and that recipe came to the US 2 years later in an American edition of a book by the British cookery star of the day, Hannah Glass. She had a book called The Art of Cookery made plain and easy. So by this point, no, Americans had donuts, they just did not have holes in them.
Well, this is it, isn't it? It's from Europe, and you see this with New York donuts, don't you? So again, I mentioned this before. Oily cakes comes from Olly Cooks, which comes from New Amsterdam, which obviously comes from actual Amsterdam, which comes from Holland, right? So as Dutch people were making donuts under another name for hundreds of years. There was an Olly Cakes shop in New York, as it now is, as early as 1673. But what you see very often in sort of the American quest to Americanize their cuisine and own it is putting a spin on it and say, well, this is the American donut. And I think that's the point, isn't it? They can point to this moment and say, well, we put a hole in it. That became the American donut, and we're proud of that. And it's nothing to do with the Dutch stuff or what the Brits were doing.
To be fair, in Captain Gregory's telling of it, he then went home on leave and he showed his mother how to make these ring donuts, and she was taken with it and started sending them out to neighbours near and far. But despite, Gregory's apparent brilliant innovation and Mother Gregory's plates of donuts in the area, America seems to have kept feasting on these greasy chunks of unpierced dough for several decades after the supposed invention in 1847. Because
you sound like John Lithgow in Third Rock from the Sun. Yes, America has appeared to be eating donuts, yes.
Well, unpierced donuts specifically, because we don't have a printed recipe for a ring donut until 1877. Around this time, cutters for punching out holes in ring donuts had begun to appear on the market. And actually, although we can't know that no one ever made one and simply didn't record it for posterity, the very name donut describes a little lump of dough. It's not describing a ring. It's like ginger nuts come from the same root. I think the problem with the American ones is Americans tend to make everything bigger. The bigger you start to make a donut, if it really is the size of a nut, it's going to cook through quite well. If you're making a giant one, it's going to be a little bit claggy in the middle.
Yeah, well, one of the Hanson Gregory stories proposes that it was Hanson Gregory's mother who put an actual nut in the middle of donuts. And that's how, according to this story, we get the word donut. And that thing itself was what created the hole, the putting of the nut in the middle. So it was kind of family connection, and he got the credit for it, but actually it was his mother.
It's mad that this one family has so many different stories about how they specifically invented donuts.
Nail one lie down, people.
But I suppose, how did we get to the situation where there are big American corporations that are selling these things? And the answer to that does have an interesting historical spin, which is, as far as I can tell, sort of uncontested. Bizarrely, World War I and France. So what happened is that volunteer women in France brought them to American soldiers in the trenches, and that was what then becomes sort of solidified in the American imagination, is when you're nostalgically remembering being in the States, you eat a donut. And then in 1920, and this is lovely, a man called Adolph Levitt in Harlem created the first automated donut with a hole in it machine, which he called the wonderful, almost human automatic donut machine. And he put it in the... Needs work. He put it in the... Krispy Kreme really nailed that. He put it in the window of his shop so that people could watch the dough stream in, the rings come out, all of that sort of compelling, gentle bubbling that we like to look at. He worked out, which is the true appeal of donuts, isn't it? It's not actually eating them. It's the smell and the anticipation of the treat. And he worked that out in 1920, and that, ever since, has become the thing that's drawn people in right the way up to and including, of course, because this wouldn't be an episode about American food without mentioning it, the 1934 World's Fair in Chicago, where they were called like the food of the future, the food hit of the century of progress.
Levitt was making millions within a few years off of obviously licensing the machine out to other people. But of more interest to Depression-era Americans was their cheapness. I mean, now that the process was automated, they were extremely cheap to make, obviously very basic ingredients. And this kind of speaks to why they were so popular in the US particularly, is their association with coffee. By the mid-1800s, that was already seen as being America's national drink. You know, they're putting away huge quantities of it, and often prepared very crudely by our standards, and as a consequence very bitter. And so a sweet donut was the perfect thing to pair with the coffee. And also, if you think about it, a ring donut is a perfect pairing because you're not going to burn your fingers dipping it in. There's a hole in the middle to protect you.
There's also some truth to that cops love donuts trope, apparently, that which is that back in the 1950s, US police officers on the graveyard shift would stop by donut shops, which were usually one of the few establishments open late. And they'd do their paperwork and have a snack. And eventually there was this kind of reciprocal relationship that developed, that donut shop owners welcomed the protection of police officers, and police officers liked having a place where they could get their donuts for,
it's
a small
cheap product to give
donation.
away for free, isn't it?
Exactly.
To your friendly neighbourhood police officer.
Yeah, and you get your own security measure.
Yeah. And the hole in the middle was caused by the gun that the police officer was holding as he returned to his vehicle.
This episode first aired last year exclusively to members of Club Retrospectors.
Join today and unlock a new episode this Sunday.
Patreon.com/retrospectors